Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to our podcast today. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know about an upcoming webinar on the topic of dementia. Dementia, losing the ability to think, remember and make sound decisions, can be really overwhelming. Our sister company, Haven, has been getting a lot of questions about dementia coverage lately. Do you really need it, and how should it fit in your overall financial plan? Join us for this webinar where Haven will explore the financial impact of dementia and how you can effectively protect yourself and your loved ones. Simply click the link in the description to register. We hope to see you there. Alright, now let's dive into today's episode. And welcome back to another episode of Providend's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, Client Advisor at Providend. Today's episode is the 5th chapter of our mini-series titled The Story of Our Client's Wealth Journey. In our first episode, we talked about who our clients typically are and their need for a trusted wealth advisor. And in our second episode, we talked about the potential reason for the lack of trust in the advisory industry and the need for sound wealth advice. In our third episode, we discussed how Providend was set up to be the trusted advisor to our clients to allow us to guide them through a minefield of misinformation with honest, independent, and competent advice. And in our previous episode, we talked about our discovery process and why it is important for us to understand our prospective clients on a deeper level and to guide them to make life decisions before making financial decisions. For today, we will be continuing on to the next stage of our advisory process, which is the presentation of analysis. Joining me today is Tan Chin Yu, team lead of our advisory team. Hi Chin Yu, pleasure to have you back.
Hi Isaac.
Right, so let's just jump right into the episode, okay? So could you start with sharing with our listeners the main objective of this presentation of analysis meeting?
Okay, so if you think back on the previous process, we talked about discovery meeting. So discovery meeting is really where you try to understand, or where we try to understand as much as possible our clients' lives, their money values, what's important to them. And that's important because if you want to craft a wealth plan that supports that, we need to understand as much as possible. So after we have gotten all that information, we deep dive in our client situation. This is where we are at, what we call presentation of analysis. So the whole purpose of it is to fine-tune the planning further, to crystallize again, what's important to our clients, where they want to go, what do they want to achieve, and then from there aligning those resources towards the things that are important to them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Chin Yu. I mean, this meeting is very important, and to be honest, the meat of the meeting is really very heavy, right? So let's unpack it step by step, right? So what's the first thing that we cover in this meeting?
So the first thing is we want to be able to again understand the client. So you have gotten all that information at discovery meeting, but it's important for us to recap again. Again, coming down to number one, what's important, and then number two, after we have taken all that back, how do we actually achieve those goals? And sometimes there could be trade-offs. Sometimes if the resources is limited, then we need to decide in terms of priority, which one do we want to achieve first, or are there certain areas that we can tweak? Yeah, and sometimes some of our clients are more blessed to have surplus, for example. Then it's also good to for us to have a discussion with clients. End of the day, how do we want to treat all these resources?
Right, so Chin Yu, we already collected all this information in our discovery meeting. Why is it important that we do a recap with the clients before we start the analysis? Or rather, before we start the presentation of analysis?
Yeah, so we want to recap because this portion is really important before we start any planning work. And why this is so is because if you think about it, the primary objective of this wealth planning is not just simply to invest your money or to just find the best returns, best product, or to grow the money as much as possible. Because, money is a resource. In fact, time is also a resource, and you want to be able to align those resources properly towards the things that are important. Yeah, and in order to do that, if you think about it, that most important piece is to really make sure that what we want to achieve, it's very clear. Yeah. So again, we take the time to understand or to make sure that our understanding of our clients is correct, and then because after discovery meeting, we take some time to work out some numbers. We want to be able to crystallize, those resources, into a more structured and concrete plan in terms of how do we achieve those goals, those important goals of our clients.
Right. So after we reiterate our understanding of our clients and their goals, we will dive into their finances, right? So could you share more about this process? Like, what do we start first when we look at their finances?
Yeah, so usually we recap on the goals, we recap on, like I mentioned, the things that are important. Then after that, one area that we look at is again where they're at the moment. Yeah, so things like their balance sheet, what's their cash flow. I think that's quite, in a way, standard. In a way, those are hygiene factors that is important to look at. Yeah, but the next part is really how then do we make use of all these resources. So for example, maybe a client say that, well, my important goal is to make memories with my families. Yeah, but in order for me to do that, maybe I need to take certain time off work. Yeah, and maybe that even requires having, for a certain period, a reduced income or even seeing certain assets drop. Yeah, but because that's really important, we want to be able to craft a wealth plan that takes that into account, and then making sure that at the same time we don't overly compromise on the future goals as well.
Right. So you said you mentioned their balance sheet. Like, could you give us more detail about what you mean by that, and also their cash flow? Yeah.
Yeah. So throughout the process, we want to consolidate everything. So usually, people's balance sheet, they have their cash, maybe investments, maybe some insurance. Property is one. Business owners might have certain business asset under their books as well. Then of course CPF balances. So these are the usual assets that clients have. At the same time, liabilities, their mortgage, maybe certain car loans or any other loans that we want to factor. So that forms their balance sheet, asset, liability, and of course at the end of the day, the net worth. Yeah. Then on the other hand, I mentioned about cash flow. So of course, cash flow, your income, maybe your working income, or for some people they got rental, or maybe for some people they have other financial instruments like bonds, like certain insurance products. Yeah. So that forms their income, and then of course, what are the expenses? So from there, we need to understand what kind of surplus do they have to further contribute towards their future goals.
Yeah. So from my experience going through when the clients consolidate all their expenses, sometimes they get a bit shocked, like, oh, I didn't know, I had this expense. Sometimes there are certain expense that don't really, it's not something that is on their mind. So for example, taxes, right? When they realize, oh, when you include the taxes that I'm paying, or all the different subscriptions that they have, they might get, it could be quite eye-opening, even though it's just data that they provide to us. When we put it in a pie chart, for example, they can see how much this expense is in comparison to their overall expense, and sometimes it's quite shocking to them.
Yeah, I think that's quite true. Sometimes we say that we force clients to do some homework.
Yeah.
Because it's true that I guess most clients, they are busy professionals. Not everyone track their expenses, as detailed as they should be. But this whole process, also quite often clients tell us that they are thankful that it forces them to actually sit down, take the time to put everything into a formalized cash flow statement, and then from there they can better identify not only in terms of where they are at the moment in terms of cash flow, but also having a sense of, let's say, retirement. How much do you need? A starting point, for example, is what are their lifestyle today, and then they want to be able to think about in the future, how is their lifestyle going to change, and how is that finances going to change as well.
Right. We also split their investable assets away from their overall assets. So why is it important that we do that?
I guess number one big asset on most clients' balance sheet is the property. So residential property, for example, although it forms a big part of the asset, it's not something that you can actually use it for your retirement cash flow. Yeah, so that's one. CPF is the other one that is not technically a liquid asset. So when you talk about investable asset, typically they are liquid assets like cash, liquid investment, shares, unit trusts, things that can be liquidated. Yeah, and then from there you can allocate them either towards shorter term goals or longer term goals. So they are more flexible. Yeah. At the same time,
for CPF OA, I mean, technically you can invest your CPF OA and SA, we can talk. I mean, we did talk about that in previous episodes, but essentially if the client wants to invest their OA as possible, you can do it with us as well. But SA, we typically do not invest it.
Yeah, that's quite true. So I guess investable asset, if you think about OA, it is something that you can decide, whether you want to invest it. Of course, there are considerations, in terms of how much time horizon you have, what sort of risk that you're willing to take on, and whether you have any short-term needs or use for this CPF monies.
Right. So when you were talking about, when we determine what is investable or not, it's also not, it's not hard. It's not hard and fast rule. I mean, some may say that, okay, all these investment properties, they're not liquid and don't classify them as investable. But some of them already earmarked their properties to be sold, and we can actually consider them as investable assets, right?
Yeah, so that's true. I mean, property technically, although it's not immediately liquid, you can liquidate it. Yeah, and once you liquidate it, you get the proceeds in cash, and then you can invest it. So that's true. Of course, if you just treat this investment property just for its rental yield, then it's a different consideration.
Right. So now let me ask you a more difficult question. Okay, so when prospective clients go to different advisory firms, right? So breaking down their assets, breaking down their balance sheet, right? Assets, liabilities, income, expense is something that all these other firms can do as well. So what sets us apart from other firms when we are going through this process with the client?
Yeah, so for us, I would say we focus a lot on the planning first, and then we come to the investment later. So if you think about, today we're talking about the presentation of analysis meeting. It's mostly on the planning side of things. There's not going to be any product recommendation. We don't talk about any investments implementation yet. Yeah, so we do want to take the time to treat each stage of the process very seriously. So planning first, because again, we want to make sure that it properly aligns with our clients' goals. Yeah, and again, it's not about growing the asset as much as possible. We're not just simply an investment management firm. Yeah, of course, investment management, your goal is to get the highest return as possible. Yeah, but wealth planning really the goal is how do you want all these assets to give you a good life? Yeah, and this good life is very different from person to person. Yeah, so this whole presentation analysis meeting, it involves a lot of discussion. It involves a lot of clarification. It also involves scenario modeling. Yeah, I'll give you an example. So, we've got clients who are business owners, and one challenge for business owners is that while your time is flexible, at the same time, a lot of business owners we see, they practically put all their time into the business. Yeah, because the more time you put to build a business, the better it grows, so the more income. Yeah, but at the same time, I mentioned earlier that time is also a resource. So if the business owners, for example, have young kids, you're trying to balance your time between growing the business and spending time with your children. There needs to be certain scenario modeling to say, for example, okay, what if we take a short break during this period to spend with my family, my kids, and as a result, what's the implication going to be for my future retirement? That could be one potential. Or on the other hand, it could be that maybe they say, okay, what if I take a slower pace in my business, as a result, lower income, and that allows me to spend more time with my family. Yeah. Then of course, a lot of these can change along the way, especially businesses. You don't know what it's going to be valued at in the future. So there's going to be a lot of assumptions. But at the end of the day, we want to be able to generate these different scenarios to help clients make the right decision.
Hi listeners, thank you so much for your ongoing support. Some long-time listeners might know that the inspiration behind this entire podcast was our CEO Chris's book titled Money Wisdom: Simple Truths for Financial Wellness. If you're interested in getting your own signed copy, please check out the link in the show notes for more information. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode. I always find that the clients see that the scenario modeling part is the most exciting part, right? So, a simple example is, let's say, we just see a simple trade-off, right? If you retire at 55, right, how would your retirement income look like potentially, and also if you push back your retirement to 60, right? What's the trade-off, right? And so of course you have a higher retirement income, but you have to work for 5 more years, right? And the way that we can do it is very flexible, right? I mean, if you want to add a few more variables, like if my spouse stopped working first, how will it look like? Or if, let's say, they sell off this asset to replace it with another asset, how will it look like? So running all the various scenarios is always very exciting for them. But of course, we have to provide that guidance to them. So we don't want to spend the whole meeting, just running various scenarios. We want to make sure that the focus is really living a good life, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, one of my example is for retirees, for example. I guess retirees also know that there are certain things that they can do at certain age. Yeah, so you don't want to push things too far off. At the same time, we do have clients that are considering other parts of the retirement. So not just retirement income, but also, for example, do they want to buy a bigger property, something that, it's closer to the life that they want to live in. So it's a bit of a trade-off because at retirement, your home is going to be where you're going to spend the most time in. But at the same time, again, the more you spend on the home, the lesser you have for your own retirement income. So there needs to be certain trade-off. And of course, clients rely on us to get that clarity so that, they make that right decision.
Right. Could you share one example of how you've gone through a scenario modeling with a client, and then how you reach an outcome that would give him, will lead him to have a good life?
Yeah, I can use that business owner example. So, we went through, for example, the different scenarios. So one scenario, for example, is, let's say, what happens if he continues working? Obviously, in terms of financial position, that's going to be the best outcome. Continue working, putting in the hours, you're going to grow your resources. But I guess at some point, those resources, there is a limit. Yeah, but of course that's the first scenario, status quo. Then second scenario, for example, is if he wants to stop work today, obviously that's the, in terms of financial position, that's the least outcome. But that gives him more time. Yeah, so financial resource lesser, time more. But he needs to be comfortable in terms of then what that financial resource can give him, and whether it still is able to fulfill the life that he wants to lead. Yeah, then of course the third scenario is that we come up with something in between. He can slow down for the next 5 years, and then he can choose to do what he wants to do with his family. Then eventually he can stop work at somewhere in between age. Doesn't mean it need to be too long. And at the end, after we have gone through the different scenarios, we fine-tune further. He finds that, doing a slowdown actually works a lot better, because I guess a lot for business owners at the same time, we want to be realistic as well. It's also not easy to immediately say, okay, yeah, I can stop work today, I'm going to just stop work. Yeah, there's going to be a transition process as well.
I don't know about you, but every time I go through different scenarios with my clients, there's a way to see whether you're getting closer to the right answer or not. And it's really about their body language. When you're going through that scenario, you can see that that they feel a lot more comfortable. They really like it. So I think that's the, I don't know about you, but when I look at, I really take a lot of cues and hints from the clients, not just what they say, but also their body language, and maybe I catch them with a slight smile on their face.
Yeah. And I think that gives us the assurance that we are providing value, not just investment returns, but providing value in terms of clarity. And some clients are more vocal than others. In fact, this particular client, he did mention that at the end of the meeting, it was the best meeting he had. Yeah, so at least as an advisor, you feel happy knowing that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thanks Chin Yu for your in-depth sharing about the scenario modeling and the POA. But let's talk about the last component of the meeting, right? Sorry, POA is presentation of analysis. The last component is, of course, insurance, right? So how do we think about insurance, and how do we approach insurance planning for our clients? I mean, in the context of our presentation of analysis.
Yeah, so if we run through the presentation analysis, starts with clarification, and then we move on to how are we going to get to those goals that are important to clients. Yeah, so after we have established and discussed all of that, we then need to think about situations that might derail this plan. Yeah, unforeseen situations, for example, premature death, critical illness, disability. So these are the things that potentially can derail a plan. Yeah, especially if the wealth plan relies a lot on ongoing income surplus. That means you need to continue working to continue building up your wealth towards that goal. Yeah, so that's where we talk about insurance. The first step is always, again, seeing where we are at the moment. So it's about consolidating all our clients' insurances, understanding what do they have, what does it cover, and then think about different scenarios. So for example, husband and wife, maybe with young kids, if one party passes on, what does the other party need to make sure that the plan stays unaffected? Yeah, if either party has a severe illness, what's going to happen? How much payout is needed or financial resources is needed to supplement that potential loss of income or even disability? Yeah, so we want to take the time also to run through all of clients' insurance. Of course, some clients' insurance, they also do have things with cash component. Yeah, so there's, again, two parts. Cash component, then we think about how does that contribute towards their planning. If it's protection, then we think about, in those scenarios, does it adequately cover those scenarios? So again, we want to make sure that clients think through these situations.
Right, Chin, so we first consolidate all their insurance, right? And for some clients, over the years, they have accumulated many, many different policies. And sometimes just demystifying what they have, just telling them what they have is quite eye-opening to them.
Yeah, it's quite true. I think many people, not uncommon, they just buy insurance. And sometimes they have a sense that, okay, I'm covered because I bought all these insurances. And as you accumulate across the years, your different policies, you do tend to forget what you have bought. Especially if it's a policy that's been explained to you many years ago. It's important to, again, come back to understanding what is this policy for, why am I continue to pay for this, as long as it's clear. Yeah, because our insurance philosophy is that insurance is an important need, but it is a cost at the end of the day. Yeah, so you do want to make sure you're adequately covered for what you need. You don't over-insure, and as long as you need. Yeah. So we take the time to consolidate everything. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort because some clients, I think the most I've seen is 40 policies. That took us a long time to consolidate everything. And how does everything fit into the wealth plan at the end of the day? We want to have that clarity for clients.
Yeah, it's about striking the balance. I mean, like you said, there's, of course, we recognize the importance of insurance, right? But we don't want, we at the same time, we want to make sure that the client is not spending too much money on their insurance, because their main plan is really to accumulate their wealth towards their retirement, or if they are retired already, to spend down their wealth in the most efficient manner. But and every dollar that you spend on insurance is every dollar less that you can spend to live a good life, right? So it's always important to remember that the main plan, what's the main plan, and of course insurance would be the support plan, right? Important, but nonetheless, there's always this trade-off when you, for every dollar that you pay for insurance.
Yep.
Right, Chin, so just now you mentioned that whether the insurance is still necessary or not, right? And this point is really important. I mean, if they bought the insurance 10, 15, 20 years ago, it could be important then, but maybe not so relevant now. So one example is that life insurance, right? Death coverage. So maybe 20 years ago when they purchased this death coverage, perhaps it's to cover a certain liability, or maybe they have very young children and they're still dependents, right? So by having this death coverage is useful, because if they were to pass away, at least their loved ones would have some money to spend until they're independent, right? And this could be irrelevant today, right? But they still hold on to all these policies and incur really unnecessary costs.
Yeah, and that's actually very true. So you think about insurance is that you want to buy insurance, but you don't hope that you claim. Yeah. So usually for a younger accumulator, folks who just got married, for example, young children, your resources are a lot lower. You're here and you're trying to get to here for your retirement. So again, the worry is that what happens in between, that something, premature death, critical illness, they're going to derail your ability to earn an income to get to where you are. So say, for example, you bought this policy 15 years ago. Then 15 years later, you have actually nothing happened. All good. You have earned income and you've gotten to this stage already. So now there's actually no need to insure this potential situation from happening. Yeah, because now you've already built your nest egg for your retirement. And technically, when you think about resources and finances, these are what is sufficient for both you and spouse. Yeah, so even if one party pass on, even there's no income, you already have enough. Yeah, so the need to cover your dependents, or rather, your dependents would be a lot lesser. Yeah, there's no need to.
And if your liability has been paid off.
Yeah, liabilities have been paid off. Kids have all grown up. Yeah, so your needs actually drop quite significantly. And at time, you can then decide whether you want to surrender this policy, if it's whole life, for the cash value. Or if you have certain critical illness cover, maybe you might want to choose to keep. But again, we want to be very intentional about it.
Yeah, so after the consolidation, I think you went into the analysis part a bit. So we do an analysis, right? And we'll determine, okay, based on our insurance framework, whether the client has too little or too much, right? So once we have identified, okay, so for let's say life, critical illness, occupational disability, long-term care, we identified that there are certain gaps or certain surplus here and there. So how do we approach, or rather, how do we guide the client on how to deal with this?
Yeah, so if there's a gap, then obviously we need to look at how to plug the gap, whether it's in terms of term insurance, if that protection need is temporary, or sometimes if you really see that it's a long-term need, then maybe even whole life, and what sort of insurances do we want to use to plug the gap. Then at the same time, there are definitely clients who have too much insurance. Then we want to be able to advise clients what to do with them. And sometimes there are certain options. Do I take a payout? Do I take a ongoing monthly income if it's some kind of retirement income product? At least client is clear. Yeah. So if I could sort of sum up, the whole POA discussion, I would say that it's really about being intentional. You want to be intentional in terms of allocating your wealth towards the things that are important to you, and you want to be intentional in how you want to treat each one of your insurances. You want to be clear what are they for. And if eventually there's no need for it, you can then better decide on either surrendering or doing something else with it.
Yeah, thanks, Shin Yu. I mean, the presentation of analysis meeting is arguably the most intensive and tiring of our advisory process. But we have to go through all our clients' financial figures. We have to crunch numbers using our quantitative analysis, and of course go through their consolidated insurance portfolio. But without the presentation of analysis meeting, we cannot go into the next meeting, which is the presentation of plan meeting, which is essentially a meeting where we talk strategy, right? So, and strategy meetings are futile if you don't have the analysis or the details right?
Yeah,
so
or you don't have the clear goals in mind.
Right, yeah. So we'll talk more about the presentation of plan meeting in the next episode. But that's all the time we have today. Yeah, thanks so much, Shin Yu, for your time and insights today, and really going through the whole process of what a presentation of analysis meeting entail.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac.
To all our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our episode on the presentation of analysis meeting. If you like this episode, please follow our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have not done so already, do not miss out on future episodes. As always, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. All analysis, views or opinions from interviews, recommendations and other information broadcasted, podcasted or published herein are provided for general information purposes only. Information expressed does not take into account any specific situation, particular needs or objectives, and should not be construed as specific advice or a recommendation. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action. Providend Limited does not accept any liability for any loss whatsoever arising from any use of the information broadcasted or published herein. All contents and information contained herein may not be copied or reproduced in whole or in part by any means without prior written consent of Providend Limited.